A simple woman, mocked at luxury auction. Then her husband's arrival. Shocks everyone. Gather around and prepare yourselves for a story that proves appearances can be astonishingly deceiving. In the hallowed halls of a prestigious London auction house, a quiet, unassuming woman in plain attire becomes the target of whispering onlookers. They see only her modest coat and scuffed shoes, dismissing her as a mere nobody in a world where status is everything. Little do they know, an earth-shattering revelation is about to flip their smug assumptions upside down. This is a tale of secret wealth, high-stakes bidding, and the unstoppable power of true love. When her husband finally arrives, the entire room will never be the same again. Elena Miller had never felt so out of place in her life. Standing on the lofty marble steps outside Sotheby's in London, she wondered if her plain grey skirt and threadbare woolen coat had been a wise choice for the evening's event. She considered herself a pragmatic woman, no pretensions, no grand wardrobe. She could hardly justify extravagant clothing when she had more pressing concerns, supporting her elderly mother in the suburbs, budgeting for her younger sister's college books, and making sure her own family never went without life's essentials. Yet here she was, heart pounding in her chest, about to step into a world so far removed from her own. She had come to Sotheby's to observe a particular item up, forbidding an exquisite set of Cartier diamond earrings, rumored to have once belonged to a French countess. She was fascinated by history and design, and the shimmering stones had a storied past that spanned generations. Though she couldn't possibly afford such luxurious jewelry, she wanted to see them with her own eyes, to experience the beauty and craftsmanship that most people only ever glimpsed in glossy magazine photos. Perhaps it was an impractical dream, but Elena believed that witnessing life's wonders firsthand could be an inspiration. She had never intended to stand out. No sooner had she stepped into the hushed, opulent foyer than she felt all eyes upon her. Her modest appearance drew curious glances, some tinged with gentle curiosity, others lined with unkind judgment. Before her arrival, hushed voices were discussing multi-million-pound paintings or rare gemstones and the provenance of antique furniture. Now a few of these voices quieted, replaced by the glaring visual scrutiny of coiffed individuals. A couple of well-dressed women in glimmering gowns cast haughty smirks in her direction, while a man in an impeccably tailored suit gave her a once-over and arched an eyebrow. Despite the tension prickling her skin, Eleanor worked to stay collected. She took a deep breath and reminded herself she was there for a reason, and she had every right to observe just like the rest of them. But as the crowd migrated into the auction hall, she could not escape the sense of being an outsider. The plush velvet seats and gilded decor offered a reminder of how far she stood from their league. Men and women quaffed champagne as if it were water. Designer labels leapt out at every turn, Chanel, Gucci, and Armani, while the twinkling diamonds around people's necks seemed to set the room aglow. Elena attempted to discreetly find a seat toward the rear. She didn't want to make a spectacle of herself. But as luck would have it, the only seat available was right in the middle of the third row from the stage, a location that placed her unavoidably on display before the entire room. Stepping around an older gentleman on her left and a young socialite on her right, Elena settled into the plush chair. She tried to shrink into it, hoping to disappear into the background. That proved impossible. The young socialite beside her, Veronica Hastings, wore a shimmering silver gown and had a mane of expertly styled chestnut hair. Veronica glanced at Eleanor's coat with open disdain. "Do you work here?" she whispered, her plucked eyebrows raised. Because if you do, can you please let someone know? My glass needs refilling. Eleanor, realizing the woman's cruel intent, simply shook her head. No, I'm just here for the auction, she replied, voice steady but polite. A faint smirk curled Veronica's glossy lips. Interesting, she drawled in a mocking tone. I'd never have guessed. Elena felt her face grow warm. She had been raised never to judge a person by their attire or their bank account, so it pained her to see how deeply appearances mattered in this world. She considered snapping back, but decided not to. She refused to stoop to rudeness. Instead, she turned her gaze away and waited for the auction to begin, hoping the drama would fade once the gavel fell. Soon, the stage lights dimmed, and the auctioneer took his place, beginning with an overview of the night's highlights. Each item was accompanied by a short history. Each starting bid soared far beyond anything Eleanor could dream of. Antique vases, collector's paintings, and rare artifacts moved quickly under the hammer. Their final prices soared into 6 and 7 figures. But Elena's heart danced in anticipation for the star of the evening, the Cartier earrings. When they finally appeared gliding across the stage in a custom-lit display case, Elena could barely contain her wonder. Each diamond caught the light, casting a rainbow of colors across the velvet interior. She'd read about them in auction catalogues. They had once been a gift from a 19th-century French nobleman to his beloved wife. With a mix of excitement and sadness, Elena realized she'd never possess such extravagant items, but seeing them up close stirred something in her heart. The bidding for the Cartier earrings began at an astonishing £500,000. Predictably, the action was swift and fierce. Veronica, the socialite next to Elena, instantly placed a bid without any flicker of hesitation in her eyes. That alone made Elena feel an uncomfortable wave of inadequacy. It underscored a disparity in life so vast that Elena's breath caught in her throat. She glanced at Veronica's smirk. The woman obviously relished competing for the object of many people's fantasies with a casual wave of her paddle. She shot a quick, sidelong glance at Elena, as if to say, "You can only dream." A hush fell over the crowd as the numbers climbed £550,000, 600,000, 650,000. The auctioneer's calls seemed to echo like thunder, while each click of the number board ratcheted up the tension. Veronica raised her paddle again at 700,000, meeting a bid from a tall man in the front row wearing a tuxedo. More gasps fluttered through the audience. The electricity in the air was palpable. Elena marveled at this financial dance. Some wealthy bidder would eventually claim these historical earrings, but she remained content, simply having seen them for herself. She cast her gaze around and noticed a few people scanning for who might outbid Veronica. Meanwhile, Veronica herself reveled in the limelight, her posture proud, her chin tilted upward, her radiant gown shimmering. She seemed to have already decided these earrings were hers. Then the bidding slowed, pausing around £750,000. The auctioneer peered around the room, searching for any last contenders. That's when the double doors at the back of the hall swung open and heads turned in unison. A man strode in confidently, exuding an aura of quiet power. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit and had an air of calm determination about him, as though used to stepping into rooms where jaws dropped in his wake. Elena, distracted by the sudden commotion, turned in her seat. Her lips parted in an expression of shock and relief. It was her husband, James Miller. But the entire room saw something else. A mysterious latecomer who paused in the aisle, locked eyes with the auctioneer, and calmly raised his paddle. His authoritative voice resonated. 800,000. A collective "Bure" rose from the audience. Even Veronica's eyes widened, a flash of envy crossing her face as she beheld the new arrival. Bidding swiftly jumped to 850,000, with a retort from the tall man in the front row, and James smoothly followed up with an offer of 900,000. Excitement sizzled through the air. No one had anticipated a newcomer would venture such a bold sum. Veronica's expression soured, her confidence shaken. She wasn't someone accustomed to losing, especially not to a random stranger. Setting her jaw, she forced her paddle upward once more. The price soared to £950,000. James seemed unperturbed. With an unchanging, calm presence, he offered £1 million. The hush deepened, peppered by the occasional gasp. It was almost as if the very oxygen had been vacuumed from the auction house, leaving behind only a thick tension. The tall man bowed out, shaking his head in dismay. Veronica's lips thinned, wavered. £1 million was a stinging figure, even for someone in her social stratum. After a moment of hesitation, she hoisted her paddle once again. €150,000. A murmur of surprise rippled across the rows. For the first time, James turned his eyes from the stage to the audience, scanning the watchers until his gaze locked on Eleanor. A warm smile graced his face, a look of reassurance that enveloped her. She felt her heart swell at the sight of him, both relieved by his presence and shocked that he was partaking in this extravagant dance. "Elena," he whispered softly. It was as if the rest of the crowd fell away for a second, leaving only them in that silent, intimate moment. The auctioneer, his voice echoing in the stunned hush, inquired politely, "Gentlemen in the aisle, do we have 100,000? James raised his paddle without blinking. 1.1 million. Veronica's face darkened, overshadowed by realization that she was nearing her upper limit. She tried to maintain a composed smile as she signaled "What's all on 150,000, but beads of perspiration glistened at her temple. The hush turned to murmuring. Several watchers were enthralled to see how far the new bidder would go. James paused, silent for a moment, that stretched out like a taut wire. Then with finality he said, 1.3 million. A collective exhale whooshed through the hall. That was far more than Veronica had expected. Her eyes flicked from James to Elena, who still sat behind her, overshadowed by the intensity of the moment. Veronica bit her lip, pride warring against common sense. The suspense was unbearable. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She gently placed her paddle down, conceding. The auctioneer's voice reverberated, going once, going twice. Sold for £1.3 million. Thunderous applause filled the hall, quickly followed by a wave of hushed whispers. The crowd could not believe this polite, unassuming man, who looked so ordinary at first glance, had just outbid some of London's wealthiest individuals in seconds. Nor could they reconcile the idea that he seemed to be connected to the quiet woman in the modest coat. James walked to the front, handling the details of the purchase with the Sotheby's staff. Conversation flitted around the room as watchers tried to piece together the puzzle of his identity. Was he a foreign investor? A tech mogul incognito? Rumors swirled with each passing second. Elena watched as he signed paperwork and gracefully shook hands with the staff. She still felt pinned to her seat, as if the moment were unreal. Once done, James turned and with a serene smile made his way down the aisle. All around him, curious stares and hushed gossip continued. He approached Elena, extended his hand, and helped her out of her seat. In a single gesture, the entire room became aware that she was with him. Together they stepped into the corridor, accompanied by a stunned hush, the quiet broken only by murmured gasps. He's with her. Veronica, eyes blazing, stood frozen in the auction hall. It took a few seconds for her to gather her composure enough to follow the pair. She found them near the registration desk at the side corridor. There she witnessed James leaning in tenderly, pressing a kiss to Elena's forehead. Something inside Veronica twisted envy and embarrassment intermingled. She swiftly approached each step, echoing her fury. I'm sorry, she stammered, though her tone was anything but contrite. Are you his friend? Elena met Veronica's startled stare calmly. I'm his wife, she answered quietly, the words resonating like a gentle gong through the corridor. And my name is Eleanor. Eleanor Miller. Veronica tried and failed to mask her shock. Wife, she repeated, voice cracking slightly. Her eyes raked over Elena's humble attire as though trying to reconcile how the wealthy man who could casually spend over £1 million at an auction would be married to someone so plain. The friction between Veronica's preconceived notions and reality was evident. She wrestled with the shame that had begun creeping into her expression. Then came the swirl of flash photography. A couple of tabloid reporters, drawn by the high-stakes bidding war, had arrived in time to catch James and Elena together. Microphones were thrust in their direction, bright lights capturing every angle. James responded patiently, stating only that he intended to enjoy his purchase privately, and had nothing more to comment. Elena found herself blinking against the flashes, her heartbeat racing. She had never sought the spotlight. It was disconcerting to see the cameras zero in on her, hungry for scandal. As the staff whisked them away to a private lounge, Eleanor let out a trembling breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. James, she whispered, you didn't have to do that. James gave her a measured look, his eyes full of warmth. But I wanted to, he replied simply. You said you wanted to see those earrings once, right? She nodded. Yes, but we don't need them. It was just a dream. We have other responsibilities, you know. He smiled. Elena, we still do. I won't let them fall by the wayside. We've done well enough, and I've made a few profitable deals in the last year. This is something I wanted to get for you to show you how much I appreciate everything you do. You take care of everyone else, never asking for anything in return. Tears shimmered in her eyes. She wasn't used to being pampered, especially not in such a public and lavish way. But more than gratitude, she felt an immense pride. Pride in James's love, and in the quiet dignity with which he'd entered this exclusive world. She sensed that more than a few onlookers were questioning their prejudices right now. In the private lounge, a plush suite behind the main hall, James made sure Eleanor was seated comfortably. A staff member brought them champagne, offered with a slight bow. Clearly, the staff had already deduced that this couple must be important. Eleanor's cheeks flushed, sipped the champagne gingerly, not entirely at ease. James placed an arm around her shoulders and gave her a gentle squeeze. What about your meeting in New York? I thought you'd be there another week, Elena asked. I concluded it early, James explained with a shrug. I had a feeling you might need me here tonight. I got a call from my friend Ian, who said you might attend this auction. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to be here if you felt alone, or if anything unpleasant happened. Elena blinked, amazed that he'd reshuffled crucial business just to be by her side. You had so much to do. Nothing is more important, he murmured, the conviction in his eyes, making her heart flutter. He paused, letting her feel the sincerity of his words before continuing. And I see I arrived just in time. Their moment was cut short when the door of the lounge cracked open, and to Elena's dismay, Veronica slipped inside. Uninvited, unannounced, she was radiating a mix of embarrassment, awe, and desperation. A staff member tried to stop her, but she waved them away. "I'm so sorry." Veronica managed her voice, quivering slightly. "I had no idea. She cast her gaze down, biting her lip. "I assumed you were someone who didn't belong here." Elena's shoulders tensed, but James remained poised. "Let her speak," he said quietly. Veronica continued. "I come to these events often. I guess I've grown used to a certain type of person attending. I didn't think twice before making fun of you. That was terrible of me. I see now how wrong I was." Elena studied Veronica's face. Despite the socialite's obvious discomfort, there was a genuineness to her remorse. The memory of Veronica's harsh words still stung, yet Elena believed in second chances. Before she could respond, Veronica pressed on. "I'm not going to make excuses," Veronica said. "I want to apologize properly. No matter how much money you have or don't have, you didn't deserve my snide remarks. It wasn't fair. I was so hung up on the idea that you shouldn't be here unless you had piles of cash to burn. And I realize now how shallow that thinking is. It's people like me who ruin these events, acting like we're above everyone else." She swallowed hard, her cheeks glowing with shame. "I can't undo what I said, but I'd like a chance to earn your forgiveness. Maybe I could make it up to you." Elena exhaled slowly. She sensed James's protective hold on her. "Thank you for your apology," she offered, quiet but firm. "I won't deny that you hurt me. I'd come here just to see something beautiful. I didn't plan on buying anything. I didn't want to bother anyone. I just wanted to admire history and design. Sometimes I think people should be allowed to enjoy what they love without having to qualify for it." Veronica nodded, her face flushed. "I see that now." Elena's eyes softened. "Sometimes it takes humility to see our faults." She continued. "I accept your apology, but I hope you'll learn from this. Not everybody who looks less than is unworthy. My mother always said that you never know a person's story until you walk a mile in their shoes." Relieved tears welled up in Veronica's eyes. She looked to James, nodding in gratitude for giving her the space to speak. Then she rummaged in her purse, retrieving a small gold-embossed card. "Please take my contact," she said, holding it out to Elena. "If I can ever make things right or help in any way, I hope you'll let me." Elena took the card, uncertain what to do with it. James nodded politely, letting the moment settle. Veronica lingered for a moment longer, as if waiting for some sign of acceptance. Finally, Eleanor extended a small smile. It was enough to tell Veronica that though not forgotten, her transgression could be forgiven. With that unspoken understanding, Veronica slipped out of the room. A hush lingered in her wake. Eleanor's mind spun with the whirlwind events, the heated bidding war, the abrupt spotlight on her marriage. The cruel laughter turned contrition, and now the final hush after the storm. She sipped her champagne again, striving to process the entire evening. But James was there, his comforting presence anchoring her. Eleanor James said softly, "I know you never expected all of this. But if it's too much, we can leave. I'll handle whatever needs to be done regarding the earrings." He took her hands gently. All I care about is whether you're all right." She closed her eyes and took a breath, anchoring herself in his warmth. "I'm all right," she assured him. "It's a lot to take in, but I'm all right." They made their way out of the private lounge. Auction staff, clearly curious, offered polite bows and hushed congratulations. News had already spread that the man with the unassuming wife had spent a staggering £1.3 million in one swoop. Eleanor felt a wave of relief when they finally reached the elevator and stepped inside, away from the gawking eyes. On the street, under the glow of lampposts, Eleanor took a steadying breath. The evening breeze caressed her cheeks, laced with London's mix of crisp night air and distant city hustle. James flagged down their driver, an older man who had worked for their family for years, named Rutherford. Eleanor had insisted countless times that she was content driving her own modest car, but James's business often required them to have a driver on standby. Tonight she was grateful for the comfort of a warm vehicle waiting for them. Rutherford opened the door, greeting them with a respectful nod. "Madam, sir," he intoned. "Shall we head home?" Elena hesitated. The adrenaline of the evening still thrummed in her veins, and she wasn't quite ready to slip back into domestic calm. She turned to James. "Could we maybe get something to eat? There's a little cafe a few blocks away. I used to pass by as a student. I'm not sure if it's still open this late, but I'd like to check." James shared a grin with her. He understood her need to ground herself back in the real world, far from million-pound earring auctions and stifling social hierarchies. "Certainly," he said, turning to Rutherford. "We'll walk there and call you if we need a ride back." Rutherford acquiesced with a nod, driving off. Linking her arm with James's, Elena felt a wave of gratefulness wash over her. They strolled down the quiet London streets, passing flickering neon signs and ornate window displays, featuring designer gowns and expensive suits. Every so often, Eleanor would catch her reflection in the polished glass. Her simple, modest figure contrasted with James's refined presence. It was a striking difference, but she no longer felt self-conscious. Instead, she felt cherished, proud to stand beside a man whose heart matched his surprising wealth. They reached the cafe, a snug little spot called Bella's Hearth, known for its homemade pastries and warm ambiance. Thankfully, it was open late. They chose a seat by the window, where soft yellow light illuminated the wooden tables and red checkered tablecloths. A young waitress approached them, looking both starry-eyed and slightly nervous. Clearly, she'd spotted the nice suit and recognized James from the local news or tabloids, which periodically featured him as a rising entrepreneur. But to her credit, the waitress tried to maintain composure. "What can I get you?" she asked, handing them menus. James, scanning the offerings, smiled. "I'd love a cup of your house coffee and a slice of apple pie." "How about you?" "Eleanor." Elena felt a wave of nostalgia. She used to frequent the place as a student, indulging in a slice of their famous lemon tart whenever she had a spare bit of change. "I'll have the lemon tart and some tea. Please," she said, returning the waitress's smile. As they waited, they chatted about simpler things. James's flight, Eleanor's day in London, how her mother was faring back home, and her sister's upcoming finals. For a moment, their conversation felt like an oasis of normalcy in a day that had been anything but. Once the desserts arrived, the warm aroma reminded Elena that despite her excitement, she was indeed hungry. She savored each bite, letting the tangy sweetness of the lemon soothe her nerves. James's presence, comforting as ever, settled her frayed edges. Even though they were millionaires, they found joy in these small luxuries, a quiet cafe, warm pastries, a shared smile. Midway through their conversation, James's phone began buzzing incessantly. He glanced at it, brows knitting, as he saw the flurry of messages from colleagues, acquaintances, even journalists. Word had travelled fast, a high-stakes bidding war at Sotheby's culminating in the surprise victory of James Miller, the soft-spoken entrepreneur, and his mystery wife. He sighed, setting the phone aside. "I'll handle it later," he said, reaching across the table to take Elena's hand. "Right now, I just want to be with you." Elena felt her cheeks warm. She squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you, James. You're always thinking of me." He shrugged lightly as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You're my wife. I'd do anything for you." But neither of them could fully ignore the impending tidal wave of public interest. By the time they paid the bill and stepped outside, a handful of camera flashes caught Elena's peripheral vision. A small group of paparazzi had stationed themselves near the entrance, no doubt tipped off by some social media post or quick text. Elena's heart fluttered with anxiety. She knew how cutthroat the press could be. It was one thing to be recognized at an auction, but an entirely different matter to be chased around the city at night. James, noticing Elena's unease, ushered her around the corner, shielding her from the cameras. He called Rutherford, who arrived in record time, to whisk them away. As the car pulled away, Elena slumped against the seat with a sigh, ceding the outside world to its frenzy of speculation. At least they were safe in the confines of the car. Back at their house, an elegant, restored Georgian townhouse on a quiet street near Hyde Park. Elena finally let her guard down. After changing into more comfortable clothes, she sat on the living room couch, James by her side. The Cartier earrings, carefully packaged, were placed on the coffee table. For a moment, Elena simply stared at them, marveling at their glittering beauty now in her home. A swirl of emotions overcame her: disbelief, gratitude, worry over how the media might twist this story. She spoke softly. "They're beautiful, James. More than I ever imagined. But you know I'd be just as happy with simpler things, like tonight at Bella's hearth." He turned to her, sincerity shining in his eyes. "I know, but part of me wants to show the world that you're not just some ordinary woman, Elena. You've been the constant anchor in my life. If I want to spoil you sometimes, I don't see anything wrong with that." His expression grew solemn. "Though I do worry about how you're feeling after all the attention, the mocking, and now the paparazzi." Elena took his hand in hers, running her thumb gently over his knuckles. To be honest, it hurt to be judged so superficially. But your arrival changed everything. You gave me strength and showed people they were wrong. In the end, it feels like a victory. And as for the paparazzi, I'm anxious, but I trust we'll handle it together. They shared a tender moment, gazing into each other's eyes. Then Elena carefully opened the velvet box that held the earrings. They sparkled like captured moonlight. A wave of awe tightened her throat. She touched one earring, feeling the centuries-old story embedded in those diamonds. Even so, she couldn't imagine wearing them in everyday life. James leaned in. They're valuable, not just for their price, but for their history. You love that side of things, the story, the craftsmanship. This is your passion. She nodded, tears threatening to gather. I do love history and design. Thank you for letting me have a piece of it, even if it's extravagant. James kissed her cheek, letting the moment settle. I never want you to feel unworthy again. The next morning dawned bright and early, but peace was short-lived. A barrage of phone calls, emails, and even knocks on the door rattled the day. Journalists seeking an interview, socialites fishing for details, old acquaintances who suddenly wanted to reconnect. Elena had to silence her phone at least 3 times. She quickly realized that the tabloids were painting a sensational tale. Ordinary wife, extraordinary wealth, or unknown woman, snags, $1 million earrings, is she an heiress in disguise? The narratives ranged from romantic to outright vicious speculation. In the midst of these swirling controversies, an unexpected ally emerged, Veronica Hastings. After that night, she used her influence in upper circles to politely but firmly squash some of the wilder rumors. She explained to her circle that Elena was no gold digger, but someone truly passionate about art and history, someone who had visited the auction out of genuine interest. Veronica also used her social media presence to highlight that people shouldn't be judged by appearances. She posted a reflective note about her own misjudgment, hoping that her followers might learn from her mistake. Elena found herself both surprised and grateful. Though she and Veronica hadn't quite formed a friendship, they were no longer adversaries. It was a twist in the tale that Elena never saw coming. The one who had initially tormented her was now defending her. Karma had done its work in a strange, roundabout way, teaching both sides a lesson. For Veronica to rethink her elitism. For Elena to see that sometimes even the harshest critics can learn remorse and become better. While public interest eventually simmered down, Elena's life changed in subtle ways. She no longer felt invisible. Whether she was dropping off donations at a local charity or browsing antique shops, people recognized her. Some approached out of curiosity, others to commend her for handling that humiliating moment at the auction with poise. It was an adjustment being considered somebody simply because she had a wealthy husband and an iconic pair of Cartier earrings in her name. Yet Elena realized her identity was more than the woman who'd been mocked at an auction. She was still the daughter who cared for her mother, the sister who championed her siblings' education, and the wife who found quiet happiness in reading a good book alongside her husband. The glitz of the diamond earrings, while breathtaking, would never eclipse her core values. In the following weeks, James approached Elena with another proposition, donating the earrings for a charity gala to raise funds for historical preservation. At first, Elena was hesitant. She loved their beauty and story, and she knew James had bought them for her out of love. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. Their life would go on just fine without them. But those earrings could be used to fund the restoration of threatened historical sites, sites that told stories of the past just like the earrings did. And that was what she loved, wasn't it? In a move that echoed her modest heart, Elena decided to place the Cartier earrings on a charitable exhibition tour. The plan was to exhibit them in museums across Europe, raising awareness and donations for heritage projects. Eventually, they would be auctioned once again, but this time, the proceeds would go entirely to charity. The announcement caused a renewed stir in the media, hailed by some as an incredible gesture, criticized by others as reckless. Elena, however, felt at peace. Veronica Hastings even reached out privately, lauding Elena's choice. She admitted that at first she only wanted the earrings to add another trophy to her collection. But seeing Elena's altruistic path made her reflect on how objects of luxury can serve a greater purpose than mere personal adornment. When the day came for the first leg of the exhibition in Paris, Elena and James flew out. She accompanied the precious earrings to Musée d'Orsay, where they would be displayed for a month. Cameras flashed again. Interviewers asked for statements, but Elena maintained her composure, explaining how preserving history and culture for the next generation was the real treasure. She saw a flicker of recognition in the eyes of some journalists. Maybe they too understood that elegance wasn't about wealth, but about character. Each time Elena saw her reflection in a museum's polished floors, dressed simply guiding a piece of history, she remembered that night at Sotheby's. The jeers, the hush, the final applause, and James's unwavering love. She understood that true worth could never be measured in currency, but in how one used their resources to bring light into the world. After the exhibition circuit ended, the Cartier earrings would soon go back under the hammer for the final fundraiser. Offers poured in from around the globe. The item had grown in fame thanks to Elena's heartfelt story. Bidders weren't just interested in the diamonds, they were moved by the cause. It became a symbolic piece representing humility and generosity in a world otherwise obsessed with glamour. Estimates suggested it might fetch even more than the original purchase price. Elena looked forward to the day the funds would be distributed, eager to see new library wings built, ancient ruins restored, and educational programs launched in underprivileged communities. That was the kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. Veronica, for her part, had learned her lesson in humility. She began supporting the same preservation causes and was seen at events that catered to philanthropic efforts rather than purely social climbing. Now, whenever she and Elena crossed paths, they exchanged courteous smiles. There was a shared recognition. Once bitter foes, they had grown into people more generous and less confined by shallow impressions. In the end, Elena found she didn't need those earrings to feel special. The real treasure was seeing the transformation in those around her. Veronica's redemption, the city's renewed interest in heritage causes, and her own deeper bond with James. If there was a lesson to be gleaned from that fateful auction night, it was that no person, however seemingly insignificant, deserves to be judged by outward appearances. Everyone has a story. Everyone is capable of greatness, especially if given a chance or shown kindness. Thus, the humble woman who had once been scorned in a room full of wealth ended up using that very wealth to create a ripple of good in the world. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that love, integrity, and selflessness could sparkle brighter than the finest diamonds ever could. And so ends our story of Elena Miller, the unassuming woman who stood strong in the face of scorn at a luxury auction. Her story reminds us never to underestimate the quietly gracious, and shows how true worth lies, not in our bank accounts, but in the power of compassion. The diamonds she briefly called her own became the catalyst for change, proving how humility and generosity can outshine any glittering jewel. From Veronica's change of heart to the charities that benefited from Elena's bold decision, we see how life's harshest moments can spark the brightest transformations. If you found meaning or inspiration in this story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread this message of kindness and remind the world that appearances can be deceiving and that kindness can indeed conquer cruelty. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more heartfelt tales.